And- All right, so basically to play now, everyone will require a pen and paper. And quickly, I just also want to state the content warning for the game. It's for ages 16 and above, and it might have some content which could be triggering. A player should expect to encounter emotive depictions and critical engagement with themes of racist, colonial, gender, and sexual violence. At the same time, I don't think it's anything which you haven't already seen in the past year or worse. So that next, I want to say that in group play, which we'll be doing now, Bewitching Technologies requires a group mediator, and Andrea Wallace today is acting as a group mediator for the upcoming demo. Thanks very much, Andrea. Hi, Andrea. And we also have some demo players joining us. We have Xenia, Helen. Hi, Xenia. Hi, Helen. And we also have Siddharth. I see Siddharth here. And Femke. Hi, Femke. So great to see you all to join us for the demo. And uh, they have played the game before, or at least some version of the game, so they'll play with us again. And you can watch them play, or you can also actually join the game, speak up and add your own contributions as Andrea is moving us through it. Andrea has now started her screen sharing, and now is the time to actually close your tabs for Bewitching Technologies if you have got it on your browser, and basically follow it through Andrea's screen. So that's how the game works. Like you can't work it in multiple different windows. It has to be one single window which you then follow. So just follow the shared screen online. Um, Also, normally when you're organizing a game, you should aside at least 90 minutes for the gameplay. But since we are a little short on time today, we'll just have about 45 minutes, I think, or maybe a little more. Maybe we'll have 55. Let's see.
If I
Uh,
want to do this, I want to do this.
uh, yeah. So I shall pass off the floor over to you, Andrea, now. It's all yours. And it's what's
Great. Well, welcome everybody. We are going to just jump right in. As Delon kind of gave an introduction and explained, this is the landing page, this is the entry point. And so at this stage, we're just going to go and enter. So, of course, we have here an invitation. We're invited to approach legal and computational practices as technological orders. So, we're going to travel through this post-apocalyptic world where people have been bewitched and betrayed by both legal and computational technologies. Genocides, pandemics, famines, pogroms, starvation, rape, murder, ecocides prevail, fueled by the newest cutting-edge computational practices and shaped by law. So, how are we going to reimagine this world? So, to begin playing is simple. Of course, we need our pen and paper, and we're going to be playing in a group. So, through this entry point, we would be choosing a group mediator, which is going to be me. We're going to play the game alongside everyone else, of course, but we're going to make sure that I specifically follow these rules. And I'm going to click on the group mediator button. So now my question is going to be to everyone else. What mode would we like to play in? We have a few options here. There's play by theme, and then there's also by guiding character. So I might say and suggest even that our players actually unmute themselves if they're in spaces where, there's not kind of surrounding noise. So that way we have a little bit more of a conversational discussion. And maybe I'll introduce you to what the themes and guiding characters are, and then we can make a decision. So in terms of themes, we have both labor entanglements of computing and law and environmental entanglements of computing and law. At the top, you can see these arrows allow us to kind of navigate through the different options. So we'll go back and we'll look at guiding character. And these are the guiding characters. So the characters themselves are going to guide us through one of the themes. And we learn about the guiding character as we interact with them. So we have Karif the geomancer and also Yuming the code worker. So I'm going to go back and open it up. How should we enter the game?
I think I would vote for the Yumeng, the code worker, to be guided by
Okay.
them.
I
Good.
see a plus
Yes.
one. Yeah. All right, let's do it. So guiding character, we're going to meet Yuming, the code worker. Oh, we chose well. All right, Yuming, the code worker, awaits our arrival. Pleasant tidings of them abound. But pay attention, what you hear may not be what they say. If you are unsure, you still have time to use the arrow above to turn back. After this point, though, there is no return. Should you wish to proceed, close your eyes, breathe in deep, exhale longer, 3 times. And slow down. Are we ready to proceed with gentle calm? A gentle rain dissolves you, and you are rearranged, molecule by molecule, until you reappear. As you, but also not quite yourself. All is quiet and twirling green, except for the patter of rain, which you notice is glowing yellow until a stranger with a lovely face appears. It is impossible to tell if they are man or woman or a puppet doll or a robot. They are now speaking in a low, balanced voice, nudging you into this new place. Welcome, O seeker of the oracle. I am Yumeng, the code worker, your trusted guide. So we have 2 options. Would you like to angrily exclaim, code worker, goddamn, you are a spy? Or would you like to calmly ask, what are you? What is a code worker?
I would like to go for the second question.
All right. Got a nomination and a second. So the lovely stranger smiles an unsettling smile. I am but a humble worker of the codes of both machine and law. During the apocalypse, I used to be a programmer and data scientist for a big reputed cloud corporation. But I was soon rattled to discover that my work was used to maintain and profit off ethnic cleansing, apartheid, and genocide. While organizing, I learned how computational codes of all sorts function to exploit labor globally and perpetuate inequality and discrimination through complex configurations of race and caste. So I turned to the codes of modern law in the search for justice. There, too, I was disappointed. I discovered legal or computational, no code is neutral, all tech political. The Oracle, too, is no neutral technology. It demands a transversal stepping into the unfamiliar. And so with discernment, you must ask it your question. So before we formulate a question or we think about this, I just want to point out that these pink texts, if we had time, they link out to either research or news items or support that relates to specifically what they're describing. So this is something that we could be doing if we were taking maybe a longer play. But now we have 2 options again. Should we thoughtfully ask, what is the oracle? Or should we confidently declare, yep, I knew it. Oracles are woo-woo scams. Any preferences?
Shall we go with woo-woo scams to kind of stir up the morning?
Let's do it. Okay, Yu Ming glances at you. The lovely face says, assessing you with his clear eyes. It is wise to be cautious. The Oracle is a once forgotten technology appearing in a new form. It scrambles all binary code, the legal and the non-legal. Zeros and ones, facts and norms, good and evil, woman and man, ideology and materialism, work and play, light and dark, matter and spirit, something and nothing. The oracle is a vessel coded in irrationality. Through its scramblings of entrenched binaries, new worlds become possible through access to other dimensions. Disconnected things appear connected, the relevant revealed as irrelevant, and vice versa. Time appears nonlinear, 3D causation blurry. The oracle is key to reconfiguring labor struggles manipulated by law and computing. You must ask it your question. A pause. Yet before you do, I recommend that you take a while and think about our conversation. So let's maybe spend a couple of minutes reflecting on the character narrative. And this goes to anyone else who's kind of pondering these questions with us. I'll just set 2 minutes for us to have a think about what Yu-Ming has posed to us before we proceed and start to think about our question. And then to aid that, we can click on this specific hyperlink, which will open the full conversation. So this way, if people are playing either in a classroom environment or somewhere else, and they want to see the full transcript of what was discussed, we have it all here for us. So I'm just going to take this and drop it into the chat for anyone else who would like to look at it as they also reflect and ponder. So let's now talk about it as a group. What are your reflections? What are you thinking about as we've now met Yu-Ming? And again, if you'd like to contribute in the chat, please drop any of your observations in.
I'm thinking about this yellow rain. There is a rain that's falling that is tinged yellow during our meeting, which I guess is kind of situating us in a pretty a quite environmentally apocalyptic scene. And it's clear that this code worker has kind of been on this like workers' inquiry journey of like understanding their positionality in cloud computing. And as we meet them in this, I don't know, it could be like a kind of nuclear fallout rain.
So Helen,
I
if I
guess I
hear
was also
you,
curious. Oh yeah, sorry. I was just also curious because I think there's a link, right, from there. They said they also reached the limitations of legal frameworks, and I think there was a link for that, and I would be curious to read more on that link.
see. Well, at this stage, I can't go back a window to look at that. But that is, yeah, that would be interesting to think about. Oh, the links are in the PDF. Perfect. So we're looking at,
I think you were just there actually
yeah,
on page
okay, here we
3.
go. There too, I was disappointed. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, page 2.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not sure if it's because I'm sharing my screen, but I'm not getting the links to work. Oh, here we go. Love this. How meta, right? TNF Online is confirming that we're human. Great. Okay, so this is a paper by Anna Lauren Hoffman. And here we go. And so if I go back to the PDF, everyone says, oh, behind a fire or a paywall. Okay, great. But Helen, also, I think what you kind of started with was relating the encounter with Yuming to what you're currently experiencing presently, right? The weather, the yellow tinge to the weather, what's happening around us, which is relevant to the conversation that we've just had with Yuming.
Yeah, or that Yu Meng was actually, I think there was a line in the conversation that as they were talking to us, rain was falling that was yellow tinged in the game
Ah, yeah,
itself.
where it starts. Okay, it's raining here in Exeter, and it is a yellow tinged rain. I took your observation also very literally. Would anyone else like to reflect on Yuming before we kind of come together and formulate a question?
And I was wondering if this rain that rearranged bodies molecule by molecule would also maybe be a way into the reconfiguration that they speak about later. So there's this whole image of configuring and reconfiguring, which is through rain or other modes. So I think also that's where my question is drifting towards.
Okay, well, should we formulate a question? I'm going to go ahead and click prepare to ask your question. So here we have a little bit more. I'm just going to readjust my screen to see if it will all fit. So we've approached the oracle. Now prepare to ask your question. Try the following steps. If you've talked to a guiding character, reflect on your conversation. If in a group, discuss your reflections. Use a pen and paper to assist your thinking and record your reflections. Let the group mediator guide the discussion. From your reflection or discussion, formulate a question that matters to you or your group in the context of AI, law, or computing. You will pose this question to the oracle, which will respond through its cards. There are no hard questions on, hard restrictions on the kind of questions that you may pose. Open-ended questions begin with how or why, however, may lead to the most generative responses. Try the button below for an additional inspiration to formulate your question. And for more resources on, or more tips on formulating a question, see optional play resources. The group mediator should try to find a collective consensus about which question to pose to the oracle. And be mindful of the group dynamics. Write down your final question and then formally pose your question by addressing the oracle and speaking it aloud. If in a group, let the group mediator formally pose a question agreed by the group. Once written and posed, you may proceed and choose a pattern in which to draw and place the oracle cards. Okay. So we're now going to follow the steps. We've actually completed a couple of them. And we're going to go to formulate a question. So I will click on formulate a question. And this is going to open again all of the steps for us to kind of sit and think about together. So maybe let's just take a couple minutes to kind of write down some questions that we have, and then we can have an open conversation and discuss them as a group and decide which one we're going to move forward with. Okay, so I'm gonna now open it up to everyone, including people who are participating by chat. Let's either drop our questions in or ask them aloud and see which ones attach to us and what we'd like to carry forward as we meet the Oracle. So Siddharth has dropped one in that says, how would you get more code workers like yourself to speak out about big corporations? It's a great question. My own was probably a little bit more broader. I just said, how do we begin to reimagine, and how do we stop the current trajectory that's a little bit out of control? Sinya, do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Again, I have more practical one, I think, and kind of more profound. The main question for me, how to prevent apocalypse, or what was the turning point that led to apocalypse? And the third one, how to make technologies serve people.
These are great questions too. Do you also want to drop them in the chat, and then that might help us when we're looking at all of them and we decide which one we want to move forward with. Helen or Femke, did you want to add to either of those?
I can add. I had why do justice systems uphold colonial white supremacist tech investment? How might we make a workers' inquiry on in legal spaces, and why do universities continue to invest in companies who are releasing white phosphorus and making the rain yellow? I can put them in the chat.
Great. Okay, I'm going to close this list. And what do we want to move forward with? Does the group have any opinions about kind of being pulled one way or the other? Femke also says, how to turn being dissolved into being rearranged for struggle. That actually feels like it relates to Star's question about how do you get more code workers like yourself to speak up, right? And the question of why do justice systems uphold white supremacist tech investments, right? The resisting the being dissolved and thinking about how we organize. So, any thoughts about what that final question is going to be? I wonder if we maybe combine a few of these and say, how do we create systems that dismantle colonial white supremacist tech investment, right? So instead of asking why justice systems are there, we ask and bring that kind of energy into the struggle and even the individual role. So does that feel like a good question? Okay, so let's write it down because we'll have it with us as we approach the oracle. And yeah, if other people have questions that they'd also like to add into the chat, we can think about those questions and also their interpretation as we move to the next stage. So how do we organize? I don't even remember what I said. Does anyone else? To dismantle colonial white supremacist tech
I was thinking as
investments.
well, Andrea, that some of the questions are like maybe also like open up into a possibility of otherwise, like Keshna's the question of how technologies might serve people, or Femke's question of how to turn being dissolved into being rearranged for the struggle, or Sidra's question on how to, in a way, kind of open up this labor organizing space to more people.
So if you wouldn't mind helping me formulate that into a question that we'll then put in the chat.
I mean, maybe Seda kind of, I don't know whether this was the question, right? But this question that Seda just put into the chat maybe is summarizing that, right? In some ways.
Yeah, that feels like a great summary. So the question is how to bring
Nice.
humans.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Do you want to jump in and go right ahead? Okay, I may have cut someone off, so please do feel free to unmute yourself and speak if you want to. But the question here is how to bring humans and non-human strength and liberation vis-a-vis computations and their infrastructures. I love that. Are we all in? Great. Okay, so now we're going to choose a pattern. And the pattern is where the cards are going to be placed. So we have our question. Now pick a pattern in which to draw and place the oracle cards. Patterns will help you explore your question in tandem with the oracle through the dimensions of time or space. Try to choose a pattern which seems most appropriate for your posed question. For example, to unpack your question geographically, choose the four directions pattern. To find answers from a temporal perspective, choose the triangular time pattern. In a group, work with a group mediator to reach consensus on the pattern choice. So in terms of what we've just discussed and also who has guided us to that question, do you feel drawn towards the triangular time pattern or towards the four directions pattern?
I think maybe the temporal triangular pattern is useful here.
Great. I see some thumbs up. All right. Ooh. So we've got the triangular time pattern. We're going to use it to explore our questions, and each of these positions holds a unique meaning. So on the left top, we have the future, which says this position may indicate or existing or necessary visions, absences, and collectivizing tactics in a situation. The future is yet to be wound. We then have the past. This position may indicate the nature of conversations or contestations around a situation. The past is not as static as presumed. And then we have the future. This position may indicate the material means and planning necessary to realize a new pathway. The present is potent. So let's confirm this pattern. And we will then use the shuffle deck, the shuffle icon to shuffle the cards. So I'm going to click on the cards. We're going to see the beautiful ripples of the shuffle and recall that randomness is no fluke or chance. It is but a manifestation of not human agencies. And the technologies through which you access this world are made of tortured land and labor. So, shuffle. And now I will draw the cards. Okay, we have one thing that just quickly I might do, which I forgot to do later, sorry, is we have a little bit of a glitch. And for some reason, we got two of the same cards. No big deal. We're just going to open this up and pick, boom, here we go. So our three cards are data, symbiosis, and consumption. And I'm going to click next for further instructions. So the cards are now played or laid, and it's time to interpret. Reflection and discussion is invited. If you posed a question, you shall receive a pathway to an answer. Use a pen and paper to direct your thinking. You may want to free write, thought dump, mind map, doodle, or draw. So try the following questions. Read the question aloud, request the oracle to lead the thoughts in a group. We'll let the group mediator do this. So oracle, please guide our thoughts. Our question is how to bring humans and non-human strength and liberation vis-a-vis computations and their infrastructures. We'll then develop an interpretation of each of these cards in its position. So the question will be, how does the relationship of the card's name, the number, and the position that it inhabits relate to our question? We'll then describe what we see in each card, what details are visible, what they mean. We have a guidebook to help us find alt text and visibility and move from one card to the next to think about what the pattern is telling us. We'll also reflect on the significance or meaning of the cards in relation to our question. So what are they telling us? We don't need to worry about being right or wrong because there's no single answer. And then we'll use our pen and paper to record our reflections. So once again, I'm going to open up the guidance for this, and I will drop it into the chat for anyone who's looking at this as well. And I think that guidance will be especially happen to have up because I'm now going to click on these cards and we're going to think about what each of them means. So for future, we have data. And the data card says, data is dead. Data enthusiasts are grave robbers and death cultists. Data is a mechanism of transforming life into executable bits and bytes. And neither modern legal nor computing technologies seem to survive without data. What does this tell you? We also have imagery in the card that can help us think about some of what's coming through, especially in future and the position of future. We then have past. So the past card is symbiosis. And this shows a network. So mycelial tracts and silicon microchips. How do technologies of law and computation connect the world, the planet, the solar system, and each other? Fungal networks of symbiosis converge and diverge from your settled vision of law and technology. Make it make sense. Tell that story. So, of course, this is also in the past position. And then last, we have consumption in the present position. So technologies of law and computation facilitate and are facilitated by consumption. Consumption is an act of eating. It is also an infectious disease that constricts your breathing. Trace the globally distributed supply chains of any product across the planetary or solar systems. You shall know. So how do we read these cards? What do you all see in them? Whether that's specific kind of iconography or details. Do you have questions? We could ask each other questions about maybe what some of the meanings of the terms even within the card mean. We can also think about them in relationship to the position that the Oracle distributed them to us in, both with respect to the individual position, but the position as a whole. So what are we thinking? Yeah, Ksenia.
Yeah. I read it as a like in the past there we had this symbiosis when we have law and technology and human and non-human as a great collective and collaborative efforts. And in the present, like what's went wrong with our beautiful symbiosis is the consumption. And I do not read it as a consumption, but rather than as a neoliberal ideology and this like constant need to consume more, to have more. And this is how we ruin this symbiosis, and this is how we end up with that data that eliminate any humans and non-humans agency. And if we reflect on our question, for me, it's kind of like we have to go back and to recreate and to think about non-human and humans as this beautiful collaboration and symbiosis that was in the past.
Mm. There's also a comment. Siddharth says, I see that liberation via infrastructure
I can also
is...
say it. Yeah,
Oh
it
yeah, go ahead,
helps.
go ahead.
No, I think so. My interpretation is that I think to our question, I think the response from the Oracle suggests that liberation via infrastructures is only one way, and that perhaps it's necessary to think also outside these structures, which would otherwise constrain the kind of imaginations that we may have. So, particularly in terms of the future, which talks of data as and in terms of commodification of data, or also in terms of consumption. So maybe infrastructures are also ways to constrict us rather than to liberate us.
Mm. Yeah, to structure us, right? Especially thinking about so I'm loving the different, visual components of the cards as well, and how those feel like they're informing the discussion, but also almost in the literal sense and how we kind of read and relate to them. These ideas of data and data produced by human bodies, about humans, about living beings, and in the process, dehumanizing. And it's an interesting position that this is in, the future, because it's already something that has been happening as part of our past. And, thinking about the visual reference here, which is to the actual creation of data by the collection of human bodies, right? And quite often, human bodies have been racialized through white supremacy. And put on display and encoded and datafied into museum collections, right? So there's some really, I think, interesting visualizations and kind of literal things that that also come through in some of these, which is really helpful. but the infrastructures is also a very interesting kind of connection to be thinking about the ways that infrastructures either structure us or withhold us.
I think as well we might also, listening to those thoughts in a way about like beyond infrastructures, right? And in a way, like for me, like the symbiosis, looking at the symbiosis, like it might be about the history of something that is more flourishing, but in a way, like I'm wondering also, like, is it a bit of a trap to fall into, like this idea that the past was perfect that we need to repair back to? And maybe there's something about the symbiosis card as well, right? Which is to think about the histories of dependencies, like the symbiosis of, we could say, like the organization of fossil fuel with like the current political systems that we have right now, right? Which would be, of course, not like the flourishing symbiosis that Kashna that you were talking about, right? But like, are there other types of symbiotic relationships in the past of the current moment that we ask the question about that are like acting upon them? And maybe it might even be to think about like in a way there is this kind of like symbiosis between silicon and computing that is hinted to in that card. And of course, like the kind of fungal networks might have had a very, very different type of symbiotic like organization in relationship to how we live, right? But those kind of like histories of extraction have this is, so I think it's interesting to think a bit about like about actually that maybe symbiosis is not always something beautiful or flourishing.
Especially when it intersects with power and the ways that that symbiosis is like sold, as the future, and how technology can liberate through what, even what you were saying, political and capitalist symbiosis. Yeah. Mm. Does anyone have any thoughts about consumption?
I'm going to take a stab at it.
Please.
Can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do a pendulum reading.
Great.
So, and the pendulum reading is that it's somewhat that there was a vision of symbiosis between man and machine that came to us in the last 40, 50 years that, found its peaks in moments of like the rise of the personal computer or the personal device, the phone that is always in our hands or pockets or whatever. And so it in a sense already created a vision of symbiosis, which was tightly coupled with consumption, and that seemingly passed through data. But what we have seen is that this is no longer just about consuming these devices, but a symbiosis with these devices to structure our consumption. And it on the surface depicts a future where this consumption can be further I love the skulls on the data thing. So the data in a sense fires this consumption, so and to our peril, but the pendulum can also strike back in the sense that kind of like how Siddharth was saying, if we could let go of this data fetish and actually focus on the consumption, we and sort of rethink our symbiosis as a way of liberating each other for the future, so that then we go back to what seems as the past, but this the pendulum striking back, asking us to reimagine a symbiosis that is not based on these devices, not passing through data, but something else.
That's I feel like it's a really important connection too, because the symbiosis and the networks that get created, even just human people living in close proximity to each other as a symbiotic organism. And then the comment that's on the consumption page of consumption being an infectious disease, that constricts your breathing. And even thinking about, the disease of consumption and how it's spread through kind of those associations and the people that we make with. Going to your point about kind of the structuring and how it then gets structured for us in a way that consumption is fed to us along a certain lens of what we should be consuming. So very, yeah. Mm. So, go ahead, Fimke.
Yeah, no, it is. Thank you, Seda, for somehow flipping future, past, and present, or mixing them up somehow. Because this is what these three cards seem to produce, like a change of direction, to not think from symbiosis to consumption into data, or data making consumption away from symbiosis, but it's actually all of them together. And then it means to disentangle this linearity and remake it in another way. So it's not just to think about the rearrangement of data, symbiosis, and consumption, but also the rearrangement of future, past, and present.
Yeah, I feel like these three cards together actually say a lot with our question. Would anyone in the chat or who's also here like to jump in and offer some reflections? I think also something that's fair game could you click on that card so we could see it a little bit bigger, because I can't read the image as well as I would like. These sorts of things too are totally fair. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and click next, and let's see what the rest of our instructions are. So do we see a response emerging? I guess that's kind of the next question for us to discuss as a group. And again, please, people in the chat and also who are joining, feel free to either unmute or contribute in that space. What do we think the Oracle is telling us in response? Is it informational? Is it aspirational? Is it a call to action? Is it insight? And again, the question that we asked was how to bring humans and non-human strength and liberation vis-a-vis computations and their infrastructures. Is there anything from our conversation that we want to take forward as we think about the next steps, which would be a manifesto or a prayer?
I guess I'm thinking a bit about this, the future data card, and the things that were discussed in a way, the kind of strategies or actions. Because in one way, it suggests like a full refusal of data, right? In terms of like legal or justice processes. So I think the card says something like data is a mechanism through which all life becomes executable by bits and bytes. And if we were to take that on with the image of the skulls on the front of the card, I'm just wondering, like, I think there's also a line in there about grave robbing and these things. And I'm wondering, like, do we, like, is, like, you know, if data is this process of robbing, which maybe the card's suggesting, or I guess the question I'm asking is, like, what, is there a type of robbery that we might collectively want to engage in? Like, would that be a counter strategy? Like, if these like processes that the future that the card is like pointing to is one of like robbery of life, but also like robbery of like these through these mechanisms, then like one of course like one mode is like protection to that, or what might be the modes in a way towards liberation that could evade or escape this type of robbery. And it might be like other forms of robbery, or it might be like forms of protection, it might be escape or evasion. It might be like disruption of the ways in which this data is generated or the infrastructures in which it's processed. So I don't know, maybe there's some thoughts a bit in the group around how we might like address what the future card is suggesting as like a mechanism.
Poisoning the data is also one of the discourses at the moment. Divestment.
Remember.
Is it? Sorry, go ahead, Pimka.
And consumption is eating, so we have to be careful with that poison. But yeah, this is a good way of thinking about data as future. It's hard to, because it's also a bit of a distraction, maybe. Can you, like...
But I think that's what also the card is saying, right? Because it says data is dead. So maybe there's an acknowledgement
of that it's not active or not lively. Yeah.
I guess, you know, we could also, the phenomena of death could be vis-a-vis the infrastructures that are so consumptive, right? Like, so what happens if the current computation, the current law dies that we're so critiquing, right? I mean, I guess there's, you know, there's one possibility that it, you know, kind of goes to its logical end, and our only presence in it is through data, which is consuming us. And then the other way around, I think, is, what if these infrastructures fall and we're so used to thinking with data? How do we create another future in which present symbiosis and consumption are not entangled or entangled differently with data? So just trying here.
It feels like the Oracle is giving us more questions to ponder as we move forward, but also the skills to kind of make the connections that we need to inform, that path. So I think at this point, I'm going to hit conclude, and we can kind of see what it is, also that the end of game looks like, because ideally we'd be.
Yes.
Oh,
Sorry, sorry to interrupt. Just before you go, there's a comment in the chat. Maybe you'll
Oh,
want to read. Yeah.
oh, great. Thanks for pointing that out. I think there's also something interesting as data being something generative, like it being seeds that enslaved women's hid in their hair so that they had food. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Also thinking about data being in the future as though it is dead, as though we know it. Maybe it comes something new, but also old. Love that. Thanks for those comments. It feels like we're continuously moving between these three cards and their positions and how they relate to each other, which is the point of the triangle pattern. Great. So, we've reached the end of the game. Thank you, fellow players, human and non-human, for guiding us through it. And thank you for everyone else who's played along with us. We would now be invited at this stage to create a manifesto or a prayer. And this is where we would potentially formalize our ideas, commitments, consolidate our insights and learnings, or create outputs for use beyond this game. We can always go and visit the play resources to have a think about that. And there's also the opportunity to screenshot and share, or also review and give feedback. So at this stage, I will pass it back to Delon.
Thanks, Andrea. And thank you, everyone. That was so fascinating to follow. This is really exciting. And yeah. All right. We are headed at noon now. So we are going to take another 10 minutes of break. When we return, then we have a panel discussion with everyone who's here. I mean, I think it'll be quite laid back and easy. We just talk about the game, how it felt like uh, playing it, and maybe how you felt like watching the play, and maybe some other questions we may ask folks around the development, the themes in the game, and so on. So that's the plan. So we'll return at 12:10 in 10 minutes from now. Thanks.